is none. Approval of minutes. Molly, you said you had a correction?
I do, have a couple things.
Yeah. Okay.
One is under chair report. I wasn't sure if this is a correction. It said, need a basketball attend the 3:30-19 meeting, but are we having a meeting?
Oh, no,
that
that should be 3:20. I caught that correction too.
Oh,
So this
that was
is
today.
not Nita Bassett. This is Lee Julio.
I think he's, I asked him how to say his
Oh.
name. Pouliot. I think.
Pouliot, you pronounce the
I
I.
think.
Yeah.
Okay,
Right, so
Lee
3:20
Pouliot,
and not 3:30.
and he, okay, so that should be 3:20, correct.
And the other thing I saw was under, at the top of page 2, under the bullet, while doing research at the water department, there's a weird sentence, there's some word missing.
On documents, maybe for
He
people
found
there.
something.
Documents which
included.
included.
Yeah, documents.
Yeah.
So the word documents should go after found. Thank you.
I have a small thing under the planting of the Y.
Page,
This is page 3 at the top.
okay.
He is still considering whether they should be underwire or shade trees. I don't know if that's, if everyone thinks that's the right term, shade tree, as opposed to underwire tree, or full-size trees.
Okay.
Maybe, I don't know. Depends on how people interpret that.
A lot of shade or little shade?
It's really just what you said, Rob. So if you can recall what you said.
No, but I wouldn't say underwire or shade tree. It's confusing to me.
What would you like the minutes to reflect, you said?
Underwire or large tree.
Okay. Do we have a motion to accept the minutes as amended?
Motion.
Second.
We'll say, for the record, Todd gave the motion and Molly made the second. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. Great, thank you.
Lily,
Yeah.
excuse me, those the minutes that you have, can I get those at the end so I can give them to Beth and she can, did you make the corrections on there?
I did, yes. You know what, there's another floating, I'll use it because I usually like to keep my own.
Oh, yeah, that's fine.
So, but I will do that for you.
Thank you, I appreciate that.
Yeah. All right, chair report. I have a lot of kind of cool things to report this week because I feel like it was a great educational week for me. So first of all, on Monday, we had our gathering at the home of Marty Nathan on Massasoit Street, and the meeting was called 2 Degrees with the invited guest, Bob Ackley, the gas leaks expert. It was well attended, with the exception of our two tree wardens, who the night before were up all night snowplowing. So they both had to bow out. So our one real tree person representative there was a good one, and that was Christina Bevanson. So I was really pleased that she was there and she heard Bob's talk. And it was just incredibly informative. And he gave a slideshow presentation and showed, you know, classic tree death from, or the way trees decline and what it looks like when they decline when they've been exposed to methane poisoning. As I mentioned to a couple of other people, I arrived 10 minutes early and he said, hop in my car, I have all my equipment set up to do a detection. He can do it straight from his car. So we just did a little tiny loop around a block of Northampton. We're talking about like 1/10 of 1% of the city of Northampton. And in that block, we picked up a leak, where else but in front of the YMCA, where we're planning on doing our Arbor Day plantings. So he also said, Sue, that he went back to Stoddard Street and detected gas leaks still. So all of this, to me, reminded me, or it confirmed how important it is, I think, that we be on top of monitoring, or we're throwing good money away, you know, in front of bad. So he, you know, was forthcoming to offer support if we ended up getting the equipment, training us how to use it. We talked a lot about what could be do at the state level. Christina was very interested in finding a way to incorporate this into her teaching with her students. She was interested in talking to Rick Harper about him, you know, incorporating it into his Urban Forestry Today monthly webinar. And then I also this week, so that was gas leaks, and I also had a tea with Molly Freilischer, which was very informative. I probably can't go into all the ins and outs of what we talked about, but Todd, you would probably not be surprised to hear that she reported that they're trying to just get numbers of the extent to which forests have been converted to non-forests for the purpose of solar arrays, and she says, as far as I can tell, there's no one at the state level tracking this data. And so that's interesting and discouraging, but trying to confirm that from a couple of different sources, because sometimes they're not going, you know, her colleague tried to reach out to the DPU, but then another citizen in Northampton reached out to the Department of Energy Resources, and they said, oh yes, we're tracking this very closely, and we're doing follow-up with the SMART program, and there's all sorts of disincentives for converting. So there's inconsistencies there. So that was the second thing I did. Then the third thing was I joined Rich and Rob and my daughter Madeline at the annual Urban Forestry Conference at UMass. And I found the morning presentations quite good, and the one that I was most compelled by was basically a conservation biologist, Molly, and I thought very much of you, because she did a study tracking birds, chickadees, in a residential neighborhood in suburban Washington, D.C. And basically the conclusion from tracking them over a period of time was that the presence of non-native trees had a huge impact on the insect population that the chickadees could feed on, and consequently the sustainability of the chickadee population. And this was, you know, it was peer-reviewed, really hard data. It was exciting getting really recent hard data about this. And what she said is that municipalities should strive for absolutely no more than 30% of trees being non-native. That is consistent with this particular bird population not being sustained. So how much you can, extrapolate that to other bird populations, so it's hard to say, but one of the things she drove home, which was like such a eureka moment for me, was that there are, like over 2,000 different caterpillar species in Massachusetts, and that native species tend to support up to like 400 different kinds of them by being, a source of food for the caterpillars. Whereas the non-native trees, it's like anywhere between 1 and 6. No, 0 to 6. So in other words, native caterpillars don't eat non-native trees. And if you don't have caterpillars, you don't have a source
Why
of
we
food.
plant non-native trees.
Well, they're a source of food for birds.
I know.
Exactly, yeah.
Planted.
Yeah, one thing that really was interesting to me is the way she defined native and non-native, which was that she basically said eastern United States
Yeah.
was native,
Yeah.
which makes life more possible.
Yeah, gives us,
for us.
So like sweet gum and stuff.
Yeah.
isn't it? Yeah, you don't see the forest here, but.
well, especially, and so that, I felt like that was an interesting both complement and contrast to the earlier presentation, which was all about storm resiliency, planting for storm resiliency. And like for them, like number 1 tree, ginkgo, and for her, like number 100th tree, ginkgo. So it's like, all right, we've got to find a balance there, but, if we don't have a healthy ecosystem, like what are we doing this for? But to that point, she was talking about how, it's not enough to be in the same genus. Like she talked about cherry trees that were native, that supported a whole slew of caterpillar varieties, whereas if they were European or Asian variety, zippo. So,
Wow, that's pretty cool.
yeah, it was, I've been to them before, and I thought these presentations were
They were
really
good.
good. So Molly, what I thought is that maybe it would be interesting to you to look on an aggregate scale at My Tree Keeper and sort all of the trees that we have by native and non-native and get a percent of where we are.
So
And just,
using eastern seaboard, eastern United States as the.
right, as the definition of
Yeah.
native. And I don't think it's going to be necessarily an easy thing to sort.
Well,
But-
it won't be that bad once you figure out for each species whether it's native or not.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then it's easy. You just go, like, the list of all those trees that we planted over the last,
Yeah.
well, not.
But I'm
every-
talking about not
oh,
just the trees
The
we planted.
existing trees.
Yeah, so you have to go through
Oh,
their
right, right,
entire
right.
list of possible trees and somehow flag which ones are native
Mhm.
and then sort for those.
Mhm.
Well, maybe start with
That's
the
not
ones
so
we
hard.
planted, because that's easy.
Right, we could start with the ones we
Yeah,
planted,
just put
control
it
over
in
that.
or no or
Right,
native.
and those are new ones that won't be on Tree Keeper.
Yeah,
Start with
but,
those.
I mean, it's certainly a place to start, but for example, Norway maple is,
Well, I
as
know.
you know, and
Yeah.
it's a very overplanted tree, so it'd be interesting to know if we're already way behind or way in front of the curve.
Yeah.
So I thought that maybe you and Marilyn would find
That
that
sounds
interesting
interesting, yeah.
project. Rob, did you want
It
to say
sounds-
anything about?
No, just
the-
it would be valuable to know about what we have planted recently, because, the Norway maples are phasing out, and then we're phasing in new trees.
Yeah.
Does Tree Keeper have data in any kind of form tabular instead of having to go through the map and go one by one down the streets?
Not the.
Oh, yeah, oh,
format.
definitely.
Is there a list of like how many Norway maples we have and how
Oh,
many?
I have
You know.
a Excel spreadsheet with the whole thing on it.
Oh, with all the data from Tree Keeper? Oh, perfect.
You
Oh.
can, you can download it, you can turn it all into an Excel document.
Oh, well, that would be pretty.
You
relatively
mean
easy.
our version? The public version you can?
No.
Oh, so you did that for Rob?
Mhm.
Okay, all right, so maybe you could.
So can I use that
Yeah,
data to,
yeah. It's a
you
year
just-
old or something, but that's.
close enough? It'll be enough for,
Well, why don't you just get Rich to run
Yeah.
it again? I mean, all of you.
I'm not sure how easy it is to get, but,
well, Rob, can you just send me the
yeah, I'll just
spreadsheet
send you
back?
what I have. Yes.
Yeah, and it says like this many Norway maples, this many Norway spruce, this many
Well,
sugar
it just
maples,
says
this many.
Norway maple, and then you can sort by species, right?
Mhm. Sure,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm sure, you do
Great.
spreadsheets
Oh,
all the
yeah.
time, you'll probably
Yeah.
figure it out really easily.
You could add a column, sort of by species, add a
Yeah.
column.
Right.
Pull
native.
down, grab the handle and pull down N for native,
Right.
you know, or
Oh, wow.
Right.
code them, just make another
I mean, you will have to
column.
go through each tree and decide whether.
No, just by species.
This-
Yes, by species.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I can, that doesn't sound too bad. Send
Yeah.
me the spreadsheet.
Great. So that's the learning I did this weekend. Did either of you want to mention anything about the
About
conference?
that meeting,
Yeah, whatever about the conference.
the conference. I have to think of anything except to say that it's very valuable to go to those because you hear the latest, newest thoughts. But I did feel that almost everything in them that came up, Rich has, and I've spoken about in some way. In other words, there were very few things like, oh, we hadn't thought of that. I mean, we're,
Oh, that's good.
very aware that some of the species we plant are not valuable to insects. And been thinking about that. And,
They're not, but we weren't alone though, because City of Springfield, that first presentation Alex Sherman gave, basically mirrored exactly the same type of trees that we're planting.
Yeah,
And he actually, it's interesting, I think Rob and I are gonna try to go down there and actually meet with him to look at their nursery that they have there, to kind of see how it's set up, because their tree program is pretty extensive, and it's a really old tree program, it's been around for a long time. So,
so that was very valuable for me because hearing Alex Sherman speak, he's taken into a lot of the things we take into consideration in terms of how we're trying to plant and what we're trying to plant. So the fact that we can then go visit, he's been doing it for much longer. I think he's been there a decade.
he's been there, and then before that, it was Ed Casey, who had been there for like 35 years. I mean, my takeaway from that whole conference was that what we're doing it right. For the most part, I mean, there's obviously, we will always tweak what we're doing, but I think planting the proper species, the right locations, spending the amount of extra time to do what we're doing. I don't know, it's.
The young tree training.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, that was definitely a
That's-
huge takeaway
yeah.
from Alex's,
Yeah.
which is, if you want to make your tree canopy more resilient from major storm events, young tree training really early.
Oh,
That
yeah.
was great.
And then the other thing, I mean, again, it's just reinforced what, I'd say over and over at this table, over and over, is setback trees, setback trees, setback trees, and Alex reinforced that, and other people did too. I mean, it's just, so, it's not that hearing it reinforced is good, because it's so easy to say, well, setbacks are hard to do relative. But, you just hear it reinforced by other people in their minds, you have to stick to it.
I felt like the native tree presentation was eye-opening because I don't think we've applied numbers to what our population is in terms of native versus non-native. So that's that's a way to guide us in the future that I think is super helpful.
Yeah, it's another, like I said, criteria, actually.
30%
If
of
we need to take
your, that's what she recommended?
Absolutely no more than 30%. I would say that you saw a lot more chance for the population to survive closer to, under 20.
It gets very complicated because she includes in her study all woody plants.
Oh,
Yeah.
oh, including shrubs and ground covers?
30% of all weed plants?
Yes,
Wait, by number or by volume or what?
that's the problem. We're not
Oh,
on
that's-
science.
You know what, I could probably
Devil's in the details.
I could get the article.
Well, I'd be
To me,
interested in
that's
reading
not
that
so
article.
relevant because we only have control over what we have control
That's
over.
correct, yeah.
So if we know that and woody plants, what are the predominant woody plants in an urban setting that are providing the most mass? It's going to be trees.
Right, but the thing is, what she was working in a suburban Washington area that was highly groomed, like every place was, and she did that partly on purpose so you could identify all the plants. In other words, instead of being like grass jungles of stuff.
Mixed.
We actually live in more of a jungle because the yards here.
Yeah, there are other trees besides the street trees.
They're just full of trees,
Yeah,
often
trees.
random trees.
Yeah.
And often not
Right.
specimen trees, whereas in Washington
Right.
DC, these trees were all specimen trees.
Right.
Every single tree was like, I mean, she showed pictures of these manicured things, like tree here. So they eliminated this great reservoir that we have in our yards of
Right.
basically maple trees, I guess.
But you know, just to add to that though, is I found it fascinating that she said that even though there were nearby parks, the chickadees favored the more residential settings for their
Yes.
habitat.
Yes.
So I don't think that we should just think that, okay, because like I abut the meadows is taking care of the
No,
wildlife.
no.
But-
But the neighborhoods that we live in, like mine is kind of typical, or Sue's, are full of non-specimen trees,
Other than just regular trees.
Yeah.
regular trees. And so the street trees are,
Volunteers.
there are a fairly small percentage of the overall Northampton tree cover. So you just have to be careful, like when you, how you apply the science, because it's not that straightforward.
I would say, like, any time when you're collecting data, you think about how is it going to be used? And,
Well, and you have to control for a lot of things, you have to
And
narrow it.
right.
So it's hard to,
Yeah.
There's one of the urban forestry webinars by Linda Chalker Scott. Do you know her? And she compiles a number of different studies looking at urban environments and native versus non-native, and you would enjoy that. That's one of those webinars. And then also the Tree Speak, or the forestry newsletter that just came out.
Susan Foster.
That's
That
interesting,
also has a Linda Chalker Scott article in it, and
Oh, I
she
didn't read
touches
that
on it
one.
there, but she doesn't go into all, but she has a lot of,
What,
There's
was
no
that
graphical
one that they
references.
referred to?
The March version is the
Yeah.
one they referred to.
Is that the Linda one?
I don't know, I can.
Because
didn't
they,
read that
right
one.
after this person lectured,
she's really been looking into that, different studies and how they've
Yes.
been done, and impacts of native and,
So at the meeting, I don't really have a full understanding of it, but the guy who was chairing it was an academic at UMass. And Molly Fleischer was there, by the way, at the meeting. The guy who was chairing it stood up and said that he totally disagreed with the article that was in the Citizen Forester and supported the scientist who presented. So, but the scientist that presented did have that webinar, where it is a scientist, and I'm pretty sure she's a scientist, and she had taken samples of insect life in
that is
non-native.
Linda Chalker Scott.
Yeah, in non-native,
In Washington.
non-native places, and found that things were going pretty well. So,
Front page.
What?
She's on the front page. excuse
Yeah.
me.
oh, okay, yeah. So I do think that there is a problem with non-natives in terms of supporting,
Yeah.
but I think that the number, my guess is, I'm just saying, it's my guess that the number of non-natives that we're putting out is having a minimal effect on the overall Northampton woody plant.
So we still don't know what our canopy percentage
Right,
is
that would be
as a
good to know.
community,
Yeah, yeah.
Right, we don't, yeah,
and what part of it
So-
we've been involved in.
right, yeah.
all right, you know what, I'm afraid I've taken more than my time of the chair report.
I'll give you my time.
Okay,
Yield
do
to
you
the-
have anything to report?
The only thing I have to report is that we had a tremendous amount of wind damage, which I think
Yeah.
you're probably all aware of. And
Yeah.
we had like 48 different tree
Oh, that
failures.
many?
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
Public shade tree?
Public and private combination. Mainly pines.
And the private don't come to your attention until they cross the public
That's
way.
correct. The private trees are, when they go across the public way, then we have to remove whatever's in the public right of way, and then we have to go back and we clean up whatever we pick up that was in the street, and we throw on people's lawns, because it's just a cut and push operation at night. You're not really you're not doing a fine job in the middle of the night. It was very windy, and it was very actually scary.
Yeah.
I don't scare very easily, but it
Yeah,
was
yeah, it was crazy.
being out there in the middle of nowhere, and, so basically from the center of Florence going west was where the majority of the damage was. There was very little damage downtown.
This might be slightly off the point, but Is it possible just to park like a flashing light and go home and go to bed?
No. No, it doesn't work that way anymore, not at all. Dispatches, they were calling us left and right, and we worked until 1 o'clock in the morning, and then we came back for 7, and they're still doing storm.
And then you had snow duty, several.
And then snow, yeah. So it's been a busy, and we're probably gonna take us another week and a half to 2 weeks to finish cleaning everything up.
Well, White Pine was definitely the tree that Alex Sherman gave the frowny face.
Yes, he did, didn't he?
Oh, really?
Yeah.
That was a storm,
The
not.
storm,
Not-
yeah,
Yeah.
that was the worst.
Yeah.
And actually, what we're gonna be getting, I think I'm gonna be getting an email that'll actually have all those presentations, so when I get them, I'll forward it to everyone, so you can all,
Great,
you can
great.
take a look
Yeah,
at
I
it.
took a ton of notes, right?
So what is it, White Pine, multiple leaders, like, is that the problem, or what's the?
It's
just
a combination, to be honest with you, a lot of them were actually blowdowns.
That's the-
The
Sale.
whole thing.
Yeah, oh, got you,
Yeah, They actually
Okay.
uprooted because
Yeah.
the ground is so,
Yep.
the ground is so saturated,
Uh-huh.
Yep.
and it's not truly frozen because
Yep.
we've had snow cover for,
Yep.
so it
I
was.
was just
Prefer
curious.
shitty soil.
Overall.
So if
They do.
If we had that level of wind when the leaves were,
Oh,
when
yeah.
the deciduous trees were full of
Oh,
leaves,
man.
pines may not have stood out, actually,
true.
right?
Yeah.
We don't know.
No, I mean, I think that, you have to take into consideration, though, the last time the wind blew that hard on Mount Washington was in 1973. So we actually beat 1973's record. So right now, that wind we had is basically record holding since
Wow.
they've been keeping records at Mount Washington.
Wow.
Now, Mount Washington's a little different, obviously, but, I mean, we had gusts going through here at 65, 70 miles an hour.
Yeah, there was some intense.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
And that's hurricane, 75 mile an hour is hurricane category 1 speed, so that's,
Yeah.
you just, it was not fun. But it is what it is, and I'm glad it didn't happen when there was leaves on the trees, but I'm sure we'll find other damage.
With snow or ice.
One other thing against the Norway maple, though, is that in his storm assessment, he didn't think Norway maples were very good.
No, because they keep their leaves longer.
They're hideous.
Witness the Halloween
Yeah,
snowstorm.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
Well, they're also brittle.
Yeah.
They're brittle as
Yeah,
they
As they age?
Yeah,
Yeah.
he's witnessed a
They're
lot
fast
of,
growth.
they are failure.
Yeah.
That's why, that's to go in hand
Yep.
in hand usually.
there's some of his assessments about what trees did well and what trees didn't apply a
Well-
filter for age, for size, like he just we had, this topped the list for number of trees that we had to take down in the tornado, and to me, it just wasn't scientific enough.
Well, he didn't have how many trees,
Where they're.
Represented
there's
in the
no
whole
ratio
population.
of existing
Yes.
population, so
Right.
you didn't
But also
know.
their age.
So, yeah, he's aged too, but he might have had 100 of one tree and 10 of them fell. It's a 10% failure.
Yeah.
He might have had 1,000 of another. and,
Right.
So you didn't know.
Yeah.
Well, also that tornado went through a certain
Certain
path,
path,
so whatever was in those neighborhoods, that could have
Right,
been.
well, that he had figured out.
He did, okay.
Yeah, that he could
Yeah.
figure out. But
That wasn't a general
and
storm.
there was a fair emphasis on Sandy. He also presented Hurricane Sandy, what the failures were there. And there was saltwater intrusion, which is not something we're,
I don't think we're gonna have to worry about it. Yeah.
so,
If we have that problem, I think we're all.
Yeah, man, we gotta hang it up.
Yeah.
Get our back of our truck.
All right,
Really.
It had some surprising results, though.
anything
The
else,
saltwater.
No,
George?
that's it.
That's it for you?
Yeah.
Okay.
That's pretty good.
I got caught like this.
Todd, do you want to talk about ordinance stuff? I know you sent me something short before the meeting, I didn't get a chance to look at it.
Yeah, so we haven't heard from the planning department based on our,
Still working on it.
okay,
Based on
our previous vote, right?
Have not heard anything from them, no.
well, having to do with the solar array?
Right.
In other words, they haven't reached out to us? Is
Right, that was my
Yeah,
question.
Carolyn had taken that week off, and then she was probably
Yeah.
coming back to a whole bunch of work, so I think we're only 1 week beyond that, so I'm not surprised.
And then, so I was trying to put together our public shade tree protection component, which would be inserted into the existing trench and driveway permit process. And I sent
So this is
Rich,
not related to solar related, right? This is.
correct.
Okay. Just-
And I sent to Rich and Lily a draft of those inserts, which really just are taken largely out of the ordinance that I wrote previously. which we call it the, I forget what we call it, the protect the tree disturbance permit, I think we call it. And what I would like for the next steps is for the city attorney to review the direction that I was going before we go too much further, and just get some feedback on, what are the landmines that we can't touch? Is this the direction that we thought we were going to go? Where is too far? But I did, Lily, take your suggestion, which was for, I believe, the significant tree ordinance, but I inserted it into this public shade tree, which was the payment in lieu of planting numbers. So the 100 for inches 1 to 3.
Do you want to describe that to everybody else?
Yeah, so we've been really since our inception kind of battling with the fact that our tree replacement metrics don't really account for the biomass of the tree, where we say, if it's a 10-inch tree, you got to have 10 inches of DBH, and obviously that's not the same. And also struggling with, these big trees have a tremendous impact on a community, and you take one down and it really has a bigger impact. So to kind of, in this case, to scale up the payment in lieu of replanting. And we can look at the replanting calculation too. So instead of one inch per 1 inch, we can look at that. I didn't have time to deal with that, but I did, for the payment in lieu of, I said that you pay $100 for the first 3 inches. For inches 4 through 6, you pay $150.
This is per inch.
Per inch.
Yeah.
And then for inches 7 through 9, you pay $250, and 10 through, or whatever. And then anything
Much
over
better.
12 inches, you pay
Yeah.
$300.
Think about it, it's
Yeah.
also, it's a
Yeah.
multiplicative
Yes,
amount of
absolutely.
biomass.
That makes
That's
much more
big.
sense.
Yeah, yeah,
And I
yeah.
asked Molly Freilish about that, and I said, why do most communities just do per inch?
Yeah.
I mean, it's like, there's a huge difference between a
Right.
10-inch and a 1-inch tree, and she just said, simplicity.
Yeah.
So it's really not that, it's because no one's really thought of doing anything different.
That sounds like a.
And you can do the same thing with the replacement. So if you cut down a 10-inch caliper tree instead of planting 10 1-inch trees, we can play with that calculation in this as well. But before I go and spend more than 2-3 hours on this, I want the
Right.
attorney to look at it.
The other thing that I came across just in scrolling through what other communities are doing is that Cambridge defines significant tree as 8 inches or larger.
8.
Yes, and we, as you know, do 20, and that is completely arbitrary, and it was basically, as you recall, plunked on our lap as a draft the first time we met, and we were given like 3 weeks to make any comments about it, and we were just too fresh. I mean, you weren't here, but the rest of us were like just getting our land legs, and I just didn't feel like I had the, I didn't have the knowledge base at all to provide much input about that draft ordinance, the time. I mean, I think that, we made some improvements, the ANSI standards and so forth, but I'm wondering if 5 years out now, it doesn't behoove us to take a really close look at that significant tree ordinance and go, what do we really want this to do, and how will this protect?
Well, I think it makes sense largely because not just of the solar pressure, but development and use of the wooded parcels pressure in general, which you will see ramped up in Western Mass, both for, not necessarily for what we used to see, subdivision development, but for energy. And you're going to see
Yep.
biomass
There was a
cutting.
big thing in the newspaper about, Baker, being really for biomass.
Yeah, there's an article in Vox that actually references the Mass law and goes into the hazards of biomass. And just in terms of the laws and the way that we're getting around the true carbon calculation when it comes to biomass.
MIT has put out a paper on that specific issue.
Oh, really? Yep. And this one professor emeritus named Bill Muma, who came and gave a presentation at Smith College upon the invitation
She's
of
in the
Casper.
Vox article.
He's mentioned in it. He's done a lot of calculations, and he is deeply, deeply concerned that we are basically fudging the numbers. And we're fudging the numbers when it comes to, global warming or greenhouse gas calculations, sequestration and so forth.
So,
And-
Sue,
Just one more piece. And that, we're really incentivizing Western Mass to become,
What do you mean, we?
the state.
Oh,
This-
Sue, the article from MIT, if you could circulate it, because that
Yeah,
might
I'll
actually
find
give
that.
us like a scientific
It was in relation
basis
to
to have a
what does
view.
carbon neutral mean?
Yeah,
And then
Yeah.
someone came up with that as saying, there is, debate over it.
yeah, I'd love to see that article and also that one too.
Yeah,
They
but-
looked at, oh, sorry.
I was just gonna say, but I think it does make sense to take another look at the significant tree ordinance with that in mind, since it was originally put forward basically to protect against certain types of subdivision clearing, but I think that's less of a concern in Western Massachusetts, given our economy here, than, what we are seeing happen.
This is again where Molly comes in though, my conversation with her, and that is, I'm not sure how protected we'll be, because land like that might fall under Chapter 61, in which case we have no jurisdiction.
Wait. Chapter 61 can
Chapter
be used for
60.
solar.
Chapter 61 could be used for timber.
Oh,
That's what
Oh,
Chapter
timber.
61 is for.
Biomass.
oh, you're talking about biomass, not
Yes,
solar.
yes, I'm talking about biomass, but we're talking about like conversion to energy. Not just solar, but also cutting down timber for biofuel. And that really falls outside of our jurisdiction, like there's,
Yeah, there's no site plan or special permit for cutting.
no, they don't do anything. Because it falls under,
so significant tree doesn't affect that.
not
Not the
if your
biomass.
land is in Chapter 61,
Right, so there is no way we can modify our, Chapter 61 covers,
Right, for just cutting, yes, but, there are other ways to, you could build a biomass facility on a property, and that's
that-
a permittable
right,
process. But no, you can't
that's,
regulate it.
right.
Ask Joe.
So, actually, right now, solar is hard to regulate, and lattice, they're both, they will have legislation that makes them hard
They
to.
lobbies.
But,
Lobby.
think money.
yeah, well, the solar one is almost accidental, because it was designed for rooftop arrays, with the legislation, to protect rooftop
Yeah.
arrays. So it was actually kind of a good thing, probably, when it happened, the sound of it,
There've been a few articles to the Gazette recently about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
Blasting the
Force.
roofs, just what we've been talking about.
Using
Yeah,
farmhouse.
and there was one that cited pseudoscience. Because I followed his link to the article, so there was one letter to the editor that talked about how solar panels produce 100 times as much energy as a stand of trees sequesters. Like, based on what? Like, what are the parameters of that study? And when I followed the link, it was to a pro-solar company that was using very rudimentary calculations. It was not, done by researchers at all.
There were 2 subsequent letters.
Yes, that were positive. That were
After
good.
that
I know,
letter.
I know. Yeah,
Yeah, there's
And
been a
then
lot
they-
of action on solar and trees, and probably 4 letters back.
well, when I saw that one letter I called out for some support or countermeasures. All right, so, anything else about, so you two are gonna connect about him making an appointment with Alan?
Yeah, I will make some comments.
Excellent. Look forward to them, sir.
We will go.
One other quick point about the biomass thing, I don't know if they fold this in, but they were thinking about that as a heat source for our campus at one point, and a lot of times they didn't figure in like the amount of tractor trailer trucks that move that stuff around.
yeah.
It would have been 3 tractor trailer trucks a day into our campus,
Yeah.
Little
Wow.
Stick campus. to be able to feed that.
It's like a mini factory.
Well, and that, I mean, we all know trucks aren't the most, as far as just making sure that's in the calculations.
Sounds like,
So many things are
That's
in
what
the
they,
calculations.
that's what they said, the
Yeah.
other day, I don't know. That seems high to me, but.
Well, for an entire campus, I mean, it was really gonna feed the entire campus.
That was what
I mean,
we
It's
were
it's
trying
not
to
like
do.
coal, it's not terribly energy dense material. All right, so I'm gonna move us along.
Chips.
Arbor Day preparations. I have something I can show folks, and that is Madeline's been working on a brochure.
I emailed the principals, but they said it was too late, so I'm pushing for like, what do we have to do to get this set up for next year? This has been lagging for years. On to Madeline.
Okay, I don't know if people want to huddle around and take a look at this, because I obviously can't put it up on a screen, but it's just, she's working on a brochure, Karen's helped her work on a map, and the map is going to be a little bit more, but I would actually love your feedback, because I think making sure that she keeps it simple, but gets the right information in. So this is, this is a trifold that has two parts. One is a cover, some explanation, and the other is the map.
It's almost the Tree Northampton logo.
Oh, is it? Well, we just pulled it off of
So probably we did.
Canva.
Up the same way.
Actually, this is going to be a placeholder too, because Maggie wants to
Okay.
draw a tree.
Oh, so where are these brochures gonna go?
So they're going to go at Senior Center, City Hall, Forbes Library, that.
Oh,
Yeah.
tell people
And then in
about
front of City Hall, yeah, tell people about Tree Speak. So this is what it says. It says, "Welcome to Tree Speak Northampton, a collaboration of the Smith College Botanic Garden and the City of Northampton. We selected 5 special trees for this tour. Learn about them and their contributions to our community." Then it cites the 5 trees and their locations. And it says, "Follow the map on reverse side to take a self-guided Tree Speak tour." Here it says how to listen. On each tree, you will find a Tree Speak label with a QR code that, when scanned by a smartphone, directs you to an audio recording about that tree. And then it gives you some bullet points. Download a free QR code reader from your device's app store. Open QR code reader on your device. Scan QR code with the reader to access the Tree Speak webpage. Press play on the audio to listen.
I need all those instructions. I don't know how to read a QR code.
It's good you have them in there,
Yeah,
I don't
I
use
wouldn't know
the-
what to do either.
I've
Yeah,
never
that-
thought
I
it.
think it's good.
I
Okay,
see them,
all
I
right.
see them all over the
I
world.
screw it up
The
as soon
trees.
as I look at it.
Listen,
Who here has
Oh,
ever
the
done
trees
that?
for the
Very
trees.
cool.
Oh, listen,
Some
column.
yes.
Some
Okay.
people might not know
I
what a
did once when
QR
they first came out, and I'm like,
So,
Oh, you know what? This is a placeholder probably for where
For-
she's gonna have.
We
a
are
What it would
sample.
look
symbol for a QR code.
Actually, it'll be a sample of the label with the QR code, probably with like an arrow that
Okay.
says QR.
That's good.
Yeah, good.
And,
And then-
okay, and so this is the map, so I'm sorry I can't make this much bigger. I can try more. Okay, there we go. This is gonna be revised further, but basically, and this is Pulaski Park, it's gonna be labeled. So you have a zoom out of Pulaski Park, which will be labeled, and it's gonna have arrows going from tree 1 to 2 to 3, and then this gets a little tricky. Then, you're going this way, then you're going out behind, like through the Roundhouse parking lot, down to Cons and
The
South.
big elm.
So you go into the elm, and then you've got a long walk here. We thought about taking people the back way, but no way. So this is up South Street. So it's a long trek to go to this last tree, but it's kind of,
People can choose.
yeah. We might even, I think we're gonna put here, champion oak tree, so that it's clear that
They don't have
it's,
to go to all at one time either.
Is that guy that lives in that house gonna be okay with,
yeah, you don't have to
Tourist.
stand on any property.
he's a little cranky.
The guy next to
Oh.
Rebecca Demark's house?
That has, I don't know if it's Rebecca Nemark's house, but
Yeah,
it
her
has,
house is to the right, they share part of the driveway.
oh, that, where the champion oak is?
Yeah, that guy doesn't, yes.
He's a little cranky.
Well, you know what, we put Rebecca's
That's on
address.
tape.
I
Okay.
forgot.
But also, you might want to put something about not turning around in
Didn't he watch
somebody's
his own
driveway.
cable TV?
If-
Oh, you know it had just been my assumption that people, this is a walking tour. It has to be a walking tour, at least out here, because
Yeah.
you're exiting the rear of
True.
Pulaski Park. So I'm wondering if we should say Tree Speak Self-Guided Walking Tour.
Walking
yeah, yeah.
/ biking tour or something?
Yeah,
Bike tour.
You
yeah.
can't bike out, well, you can.
You
Back
can.
when
Well, you
Yeah.
can, yeah, you can take your, it has a
Ramp, you know, very Euro.
All right, so
World's
any,
largest.
Because I could see people doing this part on foot, and then they'll be like, oh, I'll drive up there later.
Yeah.
It's okay to put it in
in
your
my
car.
car, I'm like.
well, they can do that on the, anytime.
I figured the more.
Anyway, any other feedback about?
Once they learn where the tree is, then they might want to use it as instructive bike car stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So walking tour, that's a good point.
We're waiting until,
That was one hairy
they
stuff.
had,
Yeah, it was.
Any other feedback about information that should be on this?
It looks nice.
Yeah, I think it's good. Simple, it's very clear, bullets, I like the bullets. Yeah.
All right. Okay, so that's Arbor Day. What else we got at Arbor Day that we need to think about? Marilyn's got all those letters that
Yep.
she was gonna print, and then we were gonna do a big letter writing thing.
I sent her the updated spreadsheet. I added a couple of landscape contractors.
I don't know how if that's been looked at, but that is part of it, is educating people. Again, I don't, all the information we've talked about, this is all available to us, and we've certainly looked at it. I think the key thing with the foundation, as was mentioned, is that you really have to have a commitment from a community group that's willing to, sort of, if you build it, will they come and will they manage it into the future? And I can say that other than these flare-ups that have occurred relative to Smith Farm Fields, or previously when there was some discussion about what might happen with the redevelopment of the landfill, we don't get, there isn't this groundswell of people saying, we want to form a group and we want to start a dog park. At least dog owners, so that's the other piece here. When we did our open space planning, it was not identified as a major, priority based on the public hearings and other things. So it's, again, we look at it, we view it as something in the context of our current recreation field, as I said, but certainly willing to, review any other information that people pass along to us.
I'm just curious if you think that if people weren't continuing to access the Smith area, if that would create that kind of, funnel so that people would be in fact interested in a public dog park. Because I think, and I also wonder if the difference between 2011 and 2018, 2011 when you did the survey and 2018, would show an increase in households with dogs and increased interest. So there are two kind of factors there that I think maybe obfuscate, what is really needed at this point.
So what ended up happening with Smith Farm Fields is that they essentially, they went to, with the same rules related and got permissions around it, as we have on our conservation lands. So you can bring your dog to Smith Farm Fields, but you have to stay on the trails, on the road access trails, and you're not allowed to go into the fields or let your dogs loose into the fields.
But we know that people don't actually adhere to that, so.
And that is a challenge, exactly. And again, it's the same issue, Broad Brook, the Broad Brook properties as well. And I'm sure if you go up to Turkey Hill, and, I'm sure people who live up on Turkey Hill Road are probably walking their dogs, and people who live near the meadows are probably walking their dogs down in, conservation and agricultural lands, and probably on or off leash. So that it's a challenge, and obviously the enforcement piece would be formidable, unless we had drones or something patrolling all these. I know, I'm sorry not to set you off there with surveillance reference, but I'm just saying we have a ranger that monitors where our reservoirs are, but that's, again, it's sort of, monitoring, but there's no way they're able to cover and keep track of all those lands up there. So it is a challenge. But again, in terms of, the city's planning and planning priorities, this has not come, this is sort of where we are in the process. We certainly know we could get grants and we could move forward with it, but again, it's a community-led process in some respects.
So would you recommend that if there's a group that's very interested in doing this, that they come together and form a friends group or come up with a plan in that way? And
I think there are dog owners that want to do that. I think that makes perfect sense. And, that was part of the impetus. Judith Fine, you may know, was one of the folks involved in trying to organize dog walkers up at Smith Farm Fields, and they were proposing to do cleanups, and they do actually do cleanups there. They do voluntary cleanups up at the Smith Farm Fields, because they didn't want to lose all access to the land. So, if there's a group out there, I don't know. I don't know if there's a group of responsible dog owners who walk at Fitzgerald Lake who don't like the other dogs, or and maybe they want to help take charge of helping us police those areas. I don't know. So, it's a good question.
It strikes me as a little bit like it's a chicken and egg thing. I can imagine there's a lot of kind of general interest out there among dog owners, but it might very well take, here's a specific site that we're considering. Now, put out the call for folks to form a group, as opposed to expecting a group to form absent a little more specific a plan. And that's where the which comes first part of it comes in. But I can appreciate that it would take at least a semblance of a plan and a possible location to get a group to gel.
I don't know if the counselor was here, but Sheldon Field was one of the places that where we're looking to do some renovations of Sheldon Field in the future, and where there's some parking capacity, and also where we've acquired some additional land. So that's one area that Anne Marie and Wayne have looked at as a possibility. I don't know what your constituents in Ward 3, if they would think that's a great thing, or how they would react to that. I know there are people who walk their dogs on the dike and walk their dogs down in the meadows, roads, and I don't know if they would view that as, oh, I'm gonna take my dog and walk it at Sheldon Field. I'm not sure.
I'm sure they'd be interested in
Yeah.
entertaining something like that. It seems like a fine use of the property that the city owns near the highway there. And through this whole discussion, the way we've had dogs. I remember as a kid having dogs. I don't remember anybody walking dogs or anybody picking anything up. I remember stepping in it all the time as a kid. And then, the way people have related to their dogs has changed dramatically over the years. And that I think that's part of what we're talking about here, is that there's some other change going on other than letting dogs roam free. I don't remember a dog ever being, maybe tied up to a stake on a rope. As a kid, I remember that kind of stuff. But that, invisible fences and, people socializing with their dogs and dog dating and, this is, and
Some people post videos of their dog on social media. Some dogs have their own
This is all
social
to
media
say that
feeds,
what we're
so.
talking about, it's worth exploring, because we're talking about people relating to their dogs and other people in new ways that don't intrude on conservation areas, and seems to be good for the dogs and for the owners as well. So,
Yeah.
other than dog shows or.
Well, speaking of which, the Vin's Dog Show is this weekend. So
Well-
people will be dressing their dogs.
But that's
up
only
in
once a year.
costume.
With this
No, but I'm
problem,
just-
we could do
I'll
this
be in a
year-round.
parade with a bunch of dogs this weekend at Irving High School. So people love dog, and I think you've probably identified that this valley is particularly, there's a high concentration of dog ownership and dog lovers. Dog passion. So, but with that, it creates these kinds of conflicts that we're running into. So.
I just want to say that in the 1980s, when I moved to Leeds, all the dogs in the neighborhood would just hang out all day loose, they knew everybody and everybody knew them. There were probably a couple dog bites involved, but that's how it used to be.
And as I said, I think there are informal dog parks. You know, probably Counselor Scherer can speak to Agnes Fox Park, which is in the State Street area, Church Street, you know, right? And that I know has dogs and even a couple pigs that live in the area. But that's a place that people just kind of bring their dogs to meet up. Same with Veterans Field. And I do see dogs at Sheldon Field, you know, occasionally, people that are out there. I've been known to throw a few Frisbees to a dog in that field just because you need a lot of space. But, so I do think that there are these informal areas that people go. Technically, they're not supposed to be off leash and people are supposed to pick up. The city has put waste collection, you know, or we're looking at adding additional waste collection as well. But that has its own ramifications in terms of the city and city staff or volunteers having to then empty those waste receptacles and supply the bags, et cetera, so.
You know, there are these enzyme pits that people build now.
Yes, yeah.
And that's one way I think that you could imagine processing at least some
I had
of
one
that
of those
waste.
in my yard.
Sarah knows
Can I
about those, I'm
speak?
sure.
Yeah, please.
Do I need to get this? One, and I want to hear from you.
Yeah, I just wanted to invite you
Yeah,
over
the
here.
only thing I want to say
Oh, no.
is the dog poop digester. So, like a phase 2 is us bringing a dog poop digester onto my property. And I've spoken to the planning department about, I actually don't think I'll have enough poop from the park, so that my park could collect, you know what I mean, but that would be a citywide thing so that could be a way to encourage people at Fitzgerald or wherever, like help put in these bags to basically, it would make power at the dog poop days that would do the lights at the dog park. So I think would be cool anyway, you know, and I think once we're about a year in operation, but it would be a company in Europe, and those are common in Europe, but we are in talks to have them donate that to the park, so. But that's something I'm happy to talk to you guys about, you know, and some kind of plan.
Are you talking about like an enzyme
Yeah.
thing, or is it like an anaerobic digester that actually turns it into?
It's an anaerobic digester, similar, there's one that does it with cow poop, I think up in Deerfield, and Berkshire Design is the one that told me about it. And so they would have to put it in bio bags and then throw it in this thing in the parking lot. So I thought it was a way to encourage people to pick up poop, but also at my park, you know, if we find dog poop, we can DNA test it. So, you know, that's also part of it. So you basically get like a penalty for nothing, you know. But that's expensive.
wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
yeah. You have to be really like good about the poop. I mean, I can talk about my park, but I just wanted to say that I think the dog poop digester could be interesting with Northampton's, even downtown, for example, like having receptacles and then saying like, put it in here, it's kind of a more interesting way to encourage people to pick it up wherever they are at any of the places they're walking, so.
Can you also provide that testing where people know what breeds their dogs are?
I don't think we're gonna do that. We'll do minimal testing, but I just wanted to mention that, I forgot to mention about the digester.
Very cool,
Yeah.
thank you. Was there anything you wanted to talk about?
I don't really have anything prepared, and we just people with a dog, and we live in town, and a park would be wonderful, and Sheldon Field sounds great, and, you know, I speak with people because, it's an urban
I'm so sorry, can I
area.
ask you to come to the podium and state your name? So Laura is taking minutes and working really hard to get them down, so we need to ask you. It's okay.
It seems terribly formal.
I'm sorry, it's our process so that we can then produce minutes so that people then can read what was
Sure,
said at
that's
this
fine.
meeting.
No, I'm Lydia Shields, and we just basically came to see what was going on and hear the plans and just have a dog, and we're just very interested in having a park. We can't let her off leash. And we don't have a fenced yard, and to socialize with other dogs, you know, within an area where we could supervise is just something that we're very interested in, and so we're willing to participate, and just wanted to hear what was going on.
Thank you.
Sure.
Didn't mean to put you on the spot, but thank you for sharing your thoughts. Did you
About
want
you?
to share anything?
Well, I'll just, I'm probably going to reiterate everything she just said, but we're dog owners. I'm Dave Collins, by the way, and we live here in Northampton. And I just want to say that as far as, I hear a lot of people saying, well, what's the interest in the dog park? And we walk our dog every day, and we walk her 3 times a day. And we run into a lot of people that have dogs, and so we've got this whole community of people that we run into all the time, and I can't tell you how many times that everybody says, gee, I wish we had a dog park so we could just let them loose and let them play. And so that's why we're here tonight, because we want to see what's happening. People want to do that. I can tell you that to get a friends group, it doesn't sound to me like it would be a difficult thing to do, because I see it because I'm out there as a dog owner, and there are tons of people who want a dog park. They want their dogs to play. And we have leash laws, we don't have a fenced yard. Our dog is a hound, and if we let her off leash, she's gone. She's just prey driven. She's the sweetest dog in the world, but she's prey driven. So if there's a squirrel or a rabbit, she'll just take off and she won't listen to us. So to have a fenced in area and a place for her to be in with other dogs is something that I know we're hearing in the community.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Okay,
I really
thank you.
appreciate it. Meredith, were you going to say something? Or?
No, I mean, I have to go to another obligation, but I just
Thank
would
you.
say that
So you have to go home and feed your dog.
I've already gone home and let the dog out before I had to go to this meeting, the next meeting. A true story. But I would say that, I will go back and chat with the planning director and, see whether we could do some kind of a survey, do some kind of a community survey, just to gauge it again. This was 2011, and, we may be able to do some kind of a survey just to see, even using some of the listservs we already have. And just
Can you use
see
it,
what-
have people sign up if they're interested in some kind of core group?
Right, or do like a call
Well,
for
that would be
friends.
I think that would be see if they wanted to self-identify themselves as someone who wanted to get involved, and then they could provide an email, and then, we could see where it happens from there. So, we can definitely try to do something like that. And again, we are actively looking at different existing recreation areas where that might be a possibility. So we can certainly try to do that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for coming in.
I'm off to Florence, so,
Okay.
but if you have follow-up questions, you know how to find me.
We do.
Thank you. Thank you,
Thanks so
everyone.
much.
Thank you.
Yes.
Also, first of all, just when the mayor's still here, we have full cooperation from the animal control officer, and we only support her.
Yep.
And we have no criticism of anybody in the city, and everybody's been supportive. It's hard to pull it all together, so thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say, we also work, Bridget Galakin, who some of you may know, and I met with the reuse committee, which is actually I guess, part of the Department of Public, not a department, it's a subset of the Department of Public Works formed when the landfill deal collapsed 10 years ago. We met with them, Peter Rackelbush, David Starr, and others, Andrew Cook, I believe, and they were very helpful. We met with them several times last fall, and so they worked on this as well. So I just want to give credit where credit is due, and to again, the animal control officer, Sheila Howe, was very helpful, and we did not mean any criticism of her. In fact, our whole question, Bob and I talked, even if you build the dog park, there's still going to be people who bring the dogs to conservation areas, and how do we enforce the law? Other communities, and this was in this slide presentation that was prepared a year ago by somebody from the town of Stone, Mass. Actually, she's a conservation officer, Kathy Severa, and some communities have basically created posse squads of young volunteers who will go out and put t-shirts on or hats or so forth and go after the people, the offenders. And when there's 4 or 5 of them, you have this critical mass, they become a little bit, people will perhaps listen a little bit more than if it's just one person. Because we have talked to the dog owners about off-leash dogs, and they really don't want to hear any kind of criticism. They just say, oh, everybody does it, and just be on with them, and it's a real problem. By the way, one other thing for the record, someone I know, Robert Jonas, some of you may know Robert, is he just recently, 2 years ago, moved to Village Hill, but his wife was a minister at the Episcopal Church in Amherst. She was jogging at Village Hill, this is 6 or 7 years ago, and was attacked by an off-leash dog, or got tangled up in whatever. And she fell and she broke her wrist, and she thought she was going to have some serious complications. Fortunately, her wrist healed satisfactorily, and she had written articles in the Daily Hampshire Gazette and the op-ed page piece advocating for some some saner way of doing things. So this has been an ongoing problem.
Thank you.
Anyone else have questions, want to share something? No?
Before we close the whole topic?
Yeah, before we close, yeah, is there any more discussion from the committee or before we close the topic? And
I guess I have a kind of a organizational question in terms of whether or not this committee has any kind of role that we can play in an ongoing way, or if we're leaving it where the mayor kind of left it as he was leaving, that he'll work with Wayne Biden of the planning department to maybe put out a survey. But is there anything else that we in some kind of formal or informal way could or should do? I guess is a question for the four of us to be talking about.
Well, I guess I'd be curious, and maybe this is happening anyway, but to sort of see where the mayor and Anne Marie and Wayne are headed in terms of a sort of a next level of analysis of the three different recreational areas that were discussed, and a little more rigorous analysis of which of them might really work based on the criteria. Because I continue to think that until there's sort of an identified possible area, it is going to be harder to generate a friends group. So I do think, without it making any commitments, but just some sense of which of them is most feasible, so that there begins to be something a little bit concrete. So maybe just an encouragement to maybe we just want to take that message back to the mayor.
Wonder if we can put this on our agenda for, I don't know, 4 months from now or something, just to check in to make sure we're not kind of letting this go. That works.
yeah, or maybe we could try and give ourselves a reminder, set a reminder for ourselves.
Create an agenda item
To-
and put it on for 4 months from now.
Right,
Something
to
that-
check back in and,
Placeholder.
yeah, and maybe invite the mayor back, or at that point, maybe Wayne or Anne Marie might be available to come.
Good idea.
Anyone else have any?
Well, I guess I just wanted to encourage what Councilor Klein was saying, that it would be very helpful if some arm of city council were kind of take an interest and take responsibility to see that the survey was actually done, and that there's a body of information from the survey that could be used in some other way to coordinate with potential people who might potentially form a friends group and so forth, to serve as kind of a coordinator, because a lot of good ideas have been advanced tonight, but they remain a bit separate and isolated from each other. So I think some sort of coordinating group, but one might expect that, the city administration should be doing that, and maybe they will be, maybe there's somebody in the recreation department or whatever who could take this on, but at least at this point where things are so tentative, it would really be very helpful to have some component of city council following what's going on.
Well, we certainly can check back in and remind the mayor of the idea. We
Sure.
can't compel a city department to do something.
Sure.
Because we don't have the jurisdiction over them. So the mayor would have to ask them to do that. So, but we will commit to staying on this idea and checking in and making
Okay.
sure that it's still on their radar and that they're gonna certainly think about it and hopefully do it.
Thank you.
I think that is our way of checking in, is
Yeah.
putting it on the agenda in a few months. And also if there's more people interested in this topic, that in a few months, when it's back on the agenda, having more people show up and speak to it, that would be helpful too.
And as you're having your conversations with other dog owners, maybe start formulating that idea or just spreading that idea that a friends group needs to be identified. And so if people are interested, maybe start an email list or something where that would, you know, we can get these different components to come together, we're more likely to gel, I think.
Sure.
Okay. Thank you all very much for coming out on a very blustery night to talk about dog parks. We
Thank
really,
you.
really appreciate that.
Thank you. Thank you all.
I don't have any new business. Does anyone else? I'll just note, so our next meeting is March 18th. It's at an unusual time. It's going to be at 7 p.m. here, and the topic is going to be short-term rentals. So, and
You know that
Counselor
I'm
Bidwell
out of town.
will not be here.
Got the quorum and everything else?
They have promised me they'll be here and we'll have a quorum.
Okay.
Even I'll be here.
You were one of the two.
Eventually.
Yes. Any other new business anyone wants to talk about?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.